got it. You better stop it. Ooh. You got it.
On this episode of the Ready State Podcast, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Vonda Wright. Dr. Vonda is a double board certified orthopedic surgeon, internationally recognized researcher, and elite team doctor specializing in optimizing performance at any age. Her pioneering research in mobility and musculoskeletal aging is transforming how we approach aging. Dr. Wright is also an expert in cutting-edge orthobiologics, including PRP for arthritis. She has extensive experience caring for athletes of all ages and skill levels, including Division I teams, Olympic athletes, and professional ballet dancers.
Let's just start with, it's a little bit overwhelming to talk to Dr. Vonda because she's so competent and such an expert across so many domains of ages and high performance. It's actually like the greatest conversation.
Yeah, she's just so knowledgeable, and I love that she comes from the perspective of an orthopedic surgeon, and she's still practicing. I mean, she's still practicing and literally works with patients from age 11 all the way to, who knows how old, but of all ages, starting as young as 11. And so I think that just provides this really unique perspective in terms of what she's seeing in what she calls the blue room, the surgery room, and how she's working really hard to make sure people don't end up in the blue room.
Yeah, and I also just want to sort of double click on this idea that here we have is an incredible orthopedic surgeon doing incredible research, but who's trying to prevent people from ending up in that blue surgical suite.
Right.
That, it's so difficult for a physician to get out of that situation. They're just so busy working with so many patients, and they're really disincentivized to say, hey, how can I prevent this? How do I talk to you about nutrition? I mean, if you go talk to your orthopedic surgeon and they're assessing your movement and loading, nutrition, like that's a really different experience. And then for her to take that knowledge and actually be like post on Instagram, write books about it, this is great.
Yeah, and for those of you just about to jump into this, there is so much practical information across lots of different spans of our lives. I mean, she wrote a book about how to raise a healthy youth athlete and has a lot of really amazing nuggets of wisdom for parents listening to this. If you're an aging athlete, she's got a lot of great information. An aging female athlete. There's just a lot here. We certainly could have talked to her for another hour and gotten a ton more information, but I thought this episode was just super valuable and really practical for anyone listening.
Also, spoiler, at the time of this recording, there's been one of the most sort of attended, noticed papers on the musculoskeletal sort of syndrome around menopause. And it is out there. We're pointing to it. She'll talk about it. But I mean, talk about a person who's redefining how medicine is meeting the needs of actual people. It's Dr. Vonda Wright.
Enjoy this episode. It's dense and amazing. Dr. Vonda, welcome to the Ready State Podcast.
Thank you. I'm actually so thrilled because I've been voyeuring you for a very long time.
Well, the same is true for me. I have been voyeuring your Instagram for a very long time, and I'm such a fan of you and your content and your work. So this is going to be a real fun one. We've really been looking forward to this.
Thank you. So fun.
So, in case anybody has not heard of you or isn't already following you on Instagram, which I recommend,
Thank you.
there is 1,000 topics to discuss. But before we do that, can you just give our audience a little bit of a backstory about you professionally as an orthopedic surgeon and, again, what you're working on, what you're excited about?
Absolutely. So, yes, indeed, my day job is as an orthopedic sports surgeon. I went to the trouble of doing a sports fellowship at Hospital for Special Surgery. So yes, it was an extra year of no sleeping. So now that sleep is such a prevalent topic, I get more and more scared every time I realize that for 7 years I didn't sleep in training, but that's another topic. So orthopedic sports surgeon. And after that, I was fortunate to return to the University of Pittsburgh as faculty, where I did a variety of things in addition to taking care of athletes and active people of all ages, all skill levels, from the really little teenagers that were just hoping to make the travel team all the way up to, I was the head doctor for the University of Pittsburgh football team for a lot of years under David Wanstead, and then ended my career there right before I moved to Atlanta as the medical director of the UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex, which is the joint venture between our sports department and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And so there got to take care of about 800 youth hockey players trying to become Sidney Crosby. So I've had this really fun behind the scenes sports career where, we're just trying to squeeze the performance out of high performers anyway, whether it's by mind and body. But along the way, my academic research was always um, active aging and the musculoskeletal system aging, both at a cellular level. I had a stem cell lab with a couple PhDs who were just brilliant. No clinician like myself goes as far as they possibly can in research without PhD partners. So I was so fortunate. And then all the way to the clinical level, where we answered questions like, can sports performance be a biomarker of aging? Can we retain our lean muscle mass with chronic exercise? Can we retain our bone density? Can we retain our brains? We did one of the first studies on brain health using exercise as a modality. And so it's been a really fun career. And along the way in 2012, I added a third circle to my Venn diagram, which is health of the woman, whole health of the woman, because I've always taken care of men and women, but this specific focus, because for a long time in research, you know this now, that no studies have been done in women, no money has been attributed to that, and yet 51% of all people are women, and we are 53 years into Title IX. So we have generations of women in sports that have been understudied. So there it is. Whoosh. What I do.
Whoosh.
Whoosh.
Not
So,
bad.
so you've just been hanging around on the couch,
Yeah.
eating
The-
little chocolate donuts this whole time.
I have to say, there is a time right now where we're seeing a lot of physicians start to own, I think, their rightful place on the forefront of not just reacting to, chronic lifestyle, chronic disease, and even just, orthopedic injury, right? And trauma. One of the interesting things about you, I think about all my sort of well-known orthopedic friends, and there aren't that many of you sort of writing, talking, lecturing, and leading, and more importantly, trying to get ahead of the causes for a lot of the reasons that young people, average people, middle-aged people end up on your table or in your office, from OA to ACL injuries, UCL, just all the things that we see and kind of are coming to accept. When did you start to picture that just sitting in your office and, creating an assembly line of ACL injuries or low back disease issues, when did you realize, hey, I may be able to play a little more offense and flip this and be at the pointy end of that spear instead of just the reaction end of that spear?
Yeah, really nice question. I frame what I do as joint longevity. And if I frame what I do as joint longevity, meaning I am, despite the fact that there's a 211% rise in the incidence of total joints in younger and younger people, and we can talk about that, my job is to prevent that ever from happening. So whether that means that we are training athletes differently so that we now know it's pretty clear. Let's take an example that because 70% of all ACL injuries happen in women. It is hormonally, it changes during the hormone cycle, but mechanically what happens, and listen, correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys are the gurus, but I stand every one of my patients who comes in on one leg, and I ask them to show me if they can do a 30 to 60 degree single leg squat without their hip dropping and their knee falling into valgus, because that shows me that their pelvis is, and their mechanics are so unstable. They're going to do that every time they take a step, and they're going to wear out they're going to drop into valgus. They're going to, like you wear out a hanger in your closet. A wire hanger is stiff. You do this enough times and it pops. That's what happens in an ACL. So whether we're getting in front of that by treating the kinetic chain, looking at the strength of the pelvis and the glute muscles, or whether we rehab in a different way. For a long time in orthopedics, it was like determining whether someone was ready to return to sport was like sticking a fork in them. They're like, I don't know, looks good.
Yeah.
No Lockman. But were they strong enough? Was their pelvis still unstable? Were they still, I mean, so now we have really intricate protocols for return to play. So those are two ways. But I think you're still accurate in saying that not a lot of us are interested in nutrition. I am. I talk about protein to every person who comes into my office. Protein intake, how they're training, are they getting enough time under a weight, for instance? Because I think lots of surgeons, bless their hearts, and I love them, are just interested in the blue room. The sterile blue room is where we do surgery, right? And many people just eat, drink, sleep, die in that blue room. But that's never going to be enough for whole person care, for caring for the whole athlete across.
And let me just jump into the system is set up
Yes,
for that
sir.
person to be an expert in the blue room. And you have to be suddenly, like you said, at an institution, at a place where you actually have access and potential agency to move down that chain
Right.
towards that sport performance, having conversations with coaches and nutrition, because the physician she is oftenly poorly set up to be able to have those conversations. You just don't get enough time or even access to that person.
Or training, right? Because what I know about return to sport and nutrition and joint longevity did not come from what I learned in medical school or my residency,
Right.
because it takes so
Or
long.
PT school.
Or PT school, really. So it takes so long to learn the technical side of my craft that everything else is picked up on the end. And then, to be fair to other surgeons, we only really get paid for the procedure. This other stuff
Right.
that I think is so important is just free.
Right. And on some very deep level, helping people prevent coming to your office isn't great for the bottom line, right? I mean, and I know that's not the goal, but this is more of a comment than a question. But I loved what you said about the wire hanger, and I felt like Kelly was like, fist bumping you from afar for that, because I can't tell you over the years how many people we had coming into our clinic when we had a clinic, and that we just talked to, that are really so shocked when they have injuries like this, like an ACL or an Achilles. And they always think that it just happened out of the blue, that,
That pillow was really heavy.
right. And again, it's actually pretty rare that we hear other clinicians, trying to say, hey, you've been moving in a crappy position for 1 million reps, if it's running or whatever sport it is. And, at one point the wire hanger just broke. And honestly, that's why we got into the business of actually, people think of us as the mobility experts, and Kelly in particular. And I'm always trying to change that perception, because really what we've always been trying to be is the movement experts, saying, hey, if you move well, and mobilize so that you can move well, then hopefully, you avoid, ending up in the blue room. But that's a hard lesson to teach. So anyway, did you?
Well, what I wanted to say is, one of the things that I really appreciate about your experience where you work is that it's at high speed and high load. And I think sometimes we can confuse the fact that at low speed and low load, you can pretty much do whatever you want with your miraculous body. You might end up with some bunions and then fall into navicular bone and then maybe a surgery eventually because you wear out your lateral compartment. But ultimately, you can get away with murder at low speed for a long time, especially if you have great genetics. But at high load, high speed, at sport, those things really clarify. One of my favorite coaches, Franz Bosch, he's Dutch, says there's more variation in waltzing than there is in sprinting, which for me highlights the fact that at high loads, high speeds, we really see that the best expressions of function come out, and we should be using those lessons, because that single standing leg, I can hear 1,000 physical therapists who say it doesn't matter, let it happen. Oh yeah, like the world is like, oh, it's just a movement, it's just a novel solution to a movement problem. How you can't even say it's good and bad. And I'm like, well, that's true under 2-foot situations at low speed when people are well fed and rested, but at high speed, high load, high stress, it becomes a liability.
It does. I mean, I'll give you I learn a lot from you guys looking. I mean, I've used your hip mobility stuff that you're demonstrating. But here's an example of that very thing from my own life, because I have completely switched the way I work out, because I'm now closer to 60 than I am to any other number. But but the I used to be in the listen, I'm bored. I am going to burn out my speed on the treadmill and I'm going to get it done fast. And because, and I don't do that anymore all the time. And I haven't been hurt since I did it at once. I'll tell you, because I blame it on Joe DeSena. But when I did that all the time, because that's what I did, I just loved to burn it out on a treadmill because of my kinetic chain problems, because my left great toe, because I wore heels all my life, has so much arthritis in it that I do not roll through my foot centrally when I heel strike. I roll off my lateral column. What happens predictably 3 weeks into that kind of high intensity all the time is I get Achilles tendonitis on the left. I get a really tight lateral thigh fascia. Left thigh fascia. And I get right iliopsoas out of control pain because my mechanics are so jacked at that speed. But when I do what I do now, which is I do the whole base training, I spend most of my time briskly, and then only twice a week do I get my heart rate up to 186 because that's my as fast as I can go heart rate. I haven't been hurt since that time. So to your point, I can do whatever I want at base training and I can keep going and still get my heart rate up when I need to. But I'm not hurt all the time like I was when I was trying to just intensely load all the time. Did I make a mess of your point?
No,
No.
that's
That was
exactly
amazing.
right. And I think it's difficult for us to say, and one of the things we've been shifting is trying to shift our language away from good and bad to, hey, that may be a short-term solution, or maybe that's worked for you for a long time. But there are actually a lot better positions where you can generate more force and have more movement choice and maintain the integrity of physiology. Because what you're doing when you said, if everyone's listening, if you stand on one leg, collapse your foot, let your knee come in, that's basically living your life on your seatbelts. And what a great reason. What a great strategy. I'm so grateful that I can make bad movement choices for a long time and have poor control and be super weak and every once in a while be drunk walking on a beach and have my knee come in and I don't explode. But if you just are decelerating your body with your seatbelts all the time in your car, you're going to see that you have problems.
Well, and that goes back to our conversation briefly about we were talking about ACLs, and the fact of the matter is recurrent ACL ruptures post reconstruction in elite athletes can be pretty high. It is not uncommon in the Olympics, as you guys know, to find somebody who's had 2 or 3. Well, it's my contention that happens for a few reasons. I don't want to, it's probably not because the athlete has bad protoplasm. They're just poorly constructed as a human being. Probably not. It can be because the surgeon didn't put the ACL in an anatomic position. That happens. Or they were completely under recovered, and maybe they never got back to good mechanics because who they were working with was not fastidious like you guys
Focused on
are.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you do not correct the mechanical problems that they had at the first time they tore it, they'll re-tear it.
Right. I mean, it's just about actually getting to the root cause of the problem, which in many cases is the mechanics. So I really do want to come back to this aging athlete and all your work you've done around that. But before that, I'd love to take a little detour, especially since you've mentioned ACLs, and know that in, I think, 2023, you published a book called Raising the Healthy Youth Athlete.
Yeah, we did.
And that subject is near and dear to our heart, in part because we're doing our own project on it. And I sit on the Positive Coaching Alliance National Leadership Council, and we are in the middle of raising a youth athlete. So for many reasons, the subject is top of our mind. And I guess in doing that work, well, first of all, what prompted you to write that book? I'd love to know, especially from an orthopedic surgeon perspective. And then also,
Which is such an unlikely voice of reason.
Yeah. And then I think, what surprised you the most in doing the research and work on that book?
Well, I had the book in my head for many, many years, but was always wanted to write it with a legend in sports medicine. Because if I came out, not that I'm not a legend, please. No, I'm kidding. I'm not.
You are a legend. You are.
If I wrote it just as by myself, people are used to talking about masters athletes. But that being said, my clinical practice goes from 11 years old to dead, right? So I'm very interested in the youth athlete. And I am the mother of a blended family of 6 youth athletes. 3 of them played Division I college football. I mean, we have raised them, and I'm married to professional hockey players. So we cannot get sports out of this family, right? So this has been a burden on my heart for a long time, because here's what's happening. Here's what's happening. And I just recorded a recording with my husband today about it. We are playing our children year round in the same sport. We are making them specialize at 7 years old before their joints are even remotely solid. And so what I see is children being raised. Now, I believe sports can save society from the chronic disease scourge we have.
Here.
But I think that we cannot expect 7-year-olds to choose football as their sport that they want to play when they're professionals. Because what we do is we train the same group of muscles. We train the same wrong movement patterns. We do not develop athletes. We develop a single skill lane. The best athletes in the world, and disagree with me if I am wrong, but the best athletes are athletes who play a particular sport. They're not soccer players, period, right? Because what's happening is, and we see it every day, orthopedic surgeons are very passionate about this, whether we talk about it or not. Children can sustain adult type injuries such as cartilage delamination, ACLs at 11, shoulder dislocations where we tear up their labrum and widen their growth plates. These are permanent injuries. You cannot regrow cartilage adequately enough. So sometimes when I talk about it, we talk about we're actually skilling our children to death, right? We're giving them so many skills that we're damaging them so much. So number one, every kid needs to get up off the couch and get out the door and just play all day. But let's let our children play, because here's what happens. About the statistics are that about 70% of all youth athletes that come up through the little T-ball ranks quit by the time they're 13, because it's not fun. They're burnt out. It's just
They're injured.
Oh, you two are so soft. They just couldn't take it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
sorry, you're a broken egg against the wall. No, I mean you're singing the song.
And I have to just like put a point in the permanent. And again, you and Kelly can sort of correct how I butcher this from a data perspective, but am I right in saying that your chances of actually having a total knee replacement once you've torn your ACL go through the roof, right? I mean, isn't it like 80% of people who have I don't know what
50%.
it's some high number so it's like, I think oftentimes we think, oh, okay, well, no big deal. My high school kid tore their ACL, and yes, they can get a surgery, and yes, they can recover and even return to sport in most cases. But what's the 20, 30, 40-year knee look like?
brilliant question, because ACL, I say this, and it's not much hyperbole, but we know that without an ACL in 20 years, you will have pretty severe arthritis. Even worse than that, you tear your meniscus, in 20 years, you're going to have end-stage arthritis. We know that because 40 years ago, when you had a meniscus tear, the meniscus was thought to be in a vestigial accessory thing. I just had a guy come in yesterday with an incision like this over his medial joint line. It was very common. They just took it out. Oh, you don't need it. All those people, end-stage arthritis. So when those injuries happen in 12, 13, 14-year-olds, I say this to parents all the time, 20 years, he's not even out of your house yet, right? So,
Right. Yeah, it's serious. It's
serious.
serious.
Meniscus is only 7 times more slippery than ice on ice. That's it. Just fine. And I'm sure that in 2.5 million years of evolution, you have a bunch of extra meniscus.
what's up with that, right?
Yeah.
You don't need it. One of the things that I really love your approach on is that you really take a systems approach, that you think, you started this conversation talking about nutrition. Dr. Nick DeNubili, who you probably have run into.
Oh, I adore him.
We've had him on, he's an old friend, and he's talked about, having to pull out the drills to get into the, for an ACL to get into those bony structures and to drill. And now he can just hand turn and hand core the shaft for that ACL repair, because we're seeing changes in bone density in our kids, which is not a bad mechanics issue. That's a whole lifestyle issue.
Yes.
So now we have this really strange lack of loading, poor nutrition, poor sleep, and then the stresses of being an athlete. We're going to end up in weird positions once in a while, because welcome to sport, right? It's not formal squatting up and down. So how do we, as parents, start to untangle that? Where do you think we should start? Because if you really do see the whole spectrum. Like, when people describe the elephant, the blind man is like, this is the trunk. You've walked around the elephant, gone over the elephant, through the elephant. You kind of see the whole thing. Where, as a parent, do I start to tug at that?
Well, and before you answer that, also, are you seeing the same thing? Are you, from the beginning of your surgical career to now, especially with the youth athlete, are you seeing those same kind of bone density changes?
I see a few things. I see heavier and heavier children carrying around a lot of extra weight. I see changes in bone density, particularly in young women. And so when I talk about the fact that we're 53 years into Title IX, it's an amazing, marvelous thing. But what I also see is osteoporosis in 24-year-olds. And that's either because...
Whoa.
I know.
Say that
I'll
again.
Say it again. I do DEXA scans on everybody, even though insurance will only pay for it when you're 65, which I think is BS. I don't know if I can swear on your show, but it's total.
Every elite program
you
I work
can
with has a
definitely
DEXA
say,
scan.
You can definitely say BS.
Yeah,
If you go to any elite program in the country right now and you have an athlete there, you'll get a DEXA scan.
Right. So I do DEXA scans. I had a 24-year-old. I had a 28-year-old with a hip fracture, and it wasn't because she was an elite track athlete. She never laid down enough bone. So here's what I see happening in youth athletes, either they've impacted their bones enough and they're eating bad food, so they don't lay down good bone, or maybe they're athletes, but women have been fed the lie for so many years that you have to be this big when you're an athlete. And so there's this scourge of a relative energy deficiency where you're working out a lot, but you're not refueling. And so you're using what you have, you're cannibalizing what you have, and you never lay it down by the time you're 30, which is when most of us stop maximum laying down bone, maximum muscle, although we can build muscle across a lifespan. But so I am seeing what he's seeing is that at younger and younger ages, we don't have the bone density we probably once did. We didn't measure, but at this point, functionally. But I think there's a lot of reasons, whether we're not feeding our athletes enough calories, or whether our sedentary population is not getting up. And listen, I'm old enough that I went outside at 6 o'clock in the morning and I didn't come home until I was filthy at night because it was safe then. And I know it's different now. I wouldn't do that with my kids now, but they just don't have the opportunity. I think a generation ago they did.
Yeah. And I think we couldn't agree with you more that it is this challenge, right? Because especially when it comes to youth sports, because Kelly and I really are on the same tip as you in that we really do believe that kids need sport more than ever now, because, unfortunately that because free play has really fallen away, we do have to insert this intentional. We have to be super intentional as parents, making sure our kids are getting enough movement and getting enough opportunity to develop the way they're supposed to be developing. So, it's how do we navigate this, crazy system that is youth sports and keep kids in? I mean, I think that's kind of our mission, is how can we help on the parent side in particular, but also on the coach side of how do we make it our mission to keep kids in sports, because they really do need it so much.
This is a project I was thinking, I just wish we could. And then I'm like, why don't I do it? But why don't you do it? I just wish we could create fence in a giant 5-acre park and just let our kids play without saying, okay, now you have to play a game. Because I'm going to tell you, our kids grew up in the environment where they just went out and played, and they're all adults. They're millennials. Even now, the 6 of them are in a room. They're playing something. They might not even have a ball, but they're kicking something. They're creating a game to entertain themselves. And sometimes when I go out to youth sports to cover, to be the doctor standing there, unless something is being instructed, the kids just hang out. because they're not used to unstructured play, which is the work of children, right? So I feel bad we've kind of taken that away because of safety. I get it's not safe, but anyway, do that, guys.
We're on it. I like that. I like
Do,
that.
I-
Just-
do I think I mean, there's a business here in creating a prison where you put kids into play. I
yeah, and
just,
be like, you will learn how to climb a tree, and you will fall from the tree, right? You know.
I think that's so, it's just, we just drop in 70s playgrounds and be like, 2 kids into, 1 kid leaves. It's
Yeah.
going to
Well, I cut off the second part of your question that Kelly asked, which is what is, I mean, obviously, with a mind towards not specializing, but yeah, the parent question.
Because
yeah.
I think we're seeing, as Juliet and I have suddenly become a lot more interested in aging as we have crested
Aged,
50.
as we have aged.
Right? The conversations are different. And we look around, we're like, oh, look at this cohort, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're seeing sort of a sequela, a series of steps for the same things that sort of are troubling us as we age, really are just a different sort of filter on the same sets of things that human beings need to feel loved and safe. We need to load, we need to eat, we need to sleep. Is it when you have addressed this or starting to really talk about women, masters athletes, how much of this was we should have taught this earlier on because it's just a follow along set of problems that we inherited because we grew up this way?
Well, even though I study master's age athletes starting at about 40, I think the time, if you've never thought about it before, to get in front of how you're going to experience 50, 60, 70 beyond is 30. I call the decade between 35-ish and 45-ish the critical decade to get your SHIT together because you're more stable socially, right? Hopefully you're through what school you're going to get through. You're out of your parents' home, hopefully. All the social things, right? But you've still got enough hormones. Because listen, when 50 comes for women, that's another whole discussion. But in the critical decade, it's time to, if you've never lifted, it's time to learn. If you've never gotten off the couch, it's time to start walking and then getting into progressively going towards healthier and healthier. It's time, frankly, to fix your sleep from your college patterns of staying up all night. It's time to evaluate what you're actually feeding your body. We're not garbage disposals, for God's sake. Could we please feed this miraculous machine? And all the things are easier when you're younger, because I will tell you for sure, for you guys have just hit 50 and it gets harder as you go. So it is very, very hard for me to help a 65-year-old catch up. If we had started when they were 30, it would have just been layering one lifestyle thing on another. But if we wait until we retire, we have a lot of catching up to do, and we'll never catch up, but we can make great progress. But what if we start paying attention to it earlier?
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Element, and our theme today is there's something for everyone.
Literally, we drink it every day, sitting on the couch last night, Caroline took a big chug of my bottle. She's like, whoa, what is this? And I was like, Element. Like, you've only
like,
had
the
it 1,000
thing that we're
times. And she's
always
like,
drinking.
but I've never had this flavor. And I was like, I've been hiding it from you. Orange. And she's like, this is so good. And I think that's really important. There's a whole variety of flavors. You don't even have to be that exotic. But like our older daughter loves the
Raspberry salt.
raspberry salt.
Yeah.
I could not take the raspberry salt.
I like raspberry salt.
Well, I know that's big of you, but there are so many flavors. The grapefruit is fantastic. Orange, I don't ever burn out because I go around. In fact, when I drink hot element, it's almost hot element season. Lemon lime is my go-to.
Yeah, and then there's some more exotic flavors like chocolate and habanero, and there's just I really do think there's something for everyone when it comes to element flavors, and it just all of them taste so good.
Yeah. One of the things that I am notorious for around here is drinking lots of water. And did you hear?
That's not
did
true.
you hear
Everyone
Ellen just spit
listening.
out of Lisa's mouth?
Yeah,
Shot out her nose.
Left to his own devices, Kelly would subsist exclusively on coffee.
and sparkling water.
That's true.
So what I'll say though is I fill up a big Yeti, and that red Yeti's downstairs, and I put 2 elements in it. So it's a huge, like, 1.5-liter bottle.
And then basically you challenge yourself to drink the entire thing in a day, and you're like, okay,
And
winning.
I'm never bummed out when I get an ice cold orange hit. Like, it really does make a difference. And sometimes at the end of the day, where I'm feeling a little tired, when I think I need coffee, what I really need is some salt and some water.
Yeah,
Changes
the
everything.
4 o'clock element bump is the way.
It's true. Look, if you want to see this for yourself, you can order through our link, and you can get a free sample pack with all of the element flavors. And of course, if you want to party in your mouth, try the Element Sparkling. Go to drinklmnt.com/TRS.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Momentous.
Look, I'm a volunteer physical therapist at Cal. I'm working with one of our goalies who's had a concussion.
Yeah, and before you get into this detail, we've actually had quite a few friends who've had prominent concussions, like our friend Rebecca Rush has recently had a really bad one. My friend Mel Strong had a really bad concussion. So, concussions are among us.
Yeah, they are amongst us. And one of the things we're trying to talk about is what can we do? And there's some burgeoning research around supplementation to prevent concussions or minimize the effect of concussions. And turns out there may be things you're already taking already. Vitamin D, omegas, and creatine. And I think what's cool is sometimes it's nice to have another reason to like the things you're already taking, but those things are already in the diet of my young goalie, right? We give her creatine in the morning, I give her vitamin D in the morning, and she takes her omegas in the evening.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this little powerful kind of trifecta of things that, like you said, we're already incorporating into our own supplementation routine and into our daughters. But you're right, it does feel good to actually have additional research and reasons piled on to be taking those things on a daily basis.
And you remember in one of our recent ambushes, there was a newsletter that there was some research supporting high levels of creatine after poor night's sleep, because one of the things it did was change your pH in your brain. And I wonder if we're going to start to see some of the effects of this creatine supplementation and its effect on the brain when the brain is challenged. It's very interesting. And stay tuned in this space, because I'm sure we're going to hear more about the research that's happening. I think 4 or 5 big universities and the military.
Yeah, and as we always say and cannot emphasize enough, all of Momentous products are certified as what they are. And that's a big reason why we partner with them and work with them, because we really believe in the quality
Purity,
of their products.
Third parties validated, and NSF, so safe for athletes.
Yep.
If you want to find out more, go to livemomentous.com/TRS and use code TRS for 20% off your first purchase of creatine, omegas, and vitamin D.
Yeah, and I mean, what we've noticed is, one of the many reasons why youth sports are doing something, moving your body in some way as a kid, is that it does seem like those who are doing that seem to somehow like and learn to like the way it feels when they move their bodies and then continue doing that. It's not as much of a, I'm now 30 and I'm stable, I need to figure out what to do. It seems like the people who lean toward doing that right now have been doing something. At least it's easier for them to get something started at 30, right? And that's another reason why getting kids into sports or physical activity or whatever may have yet another benefit, is that, people actually, and that's really ultimately, if I really pared down my own goal of having my kids in sports at the most basic level, sports or whatever kind of movement, like Lisa's son is this like sick skateboarder, but just some movement practice is that I hope that they like how moving makes them feel, and that they keep doing it when they leave home, right? Like, honestly, as a parent, I think that's my ultimate goal, is like I want them to keep moving.
A lifetime of mobility, right? I think that's what you're saying. Well, and what parents maybe don't know is that every time you shove your kid out the door to play something, whether it's organized or not, you're laying the groundwork for their total adipose cell count, for the amount and efficacy of their mitochondria. That's built when we're little, when we're building that aerobic base, running around all the time. Whereas if we never build an aerobic base when we're little, we're really behind the 8 ball if we decide in midlife to get active. But I do want to return to this parent question. And your
Yes.
listeners may or may not like what I have to say, but I
Oh
feel
boy.
very
Give it to
passionate
us.
about it. If you want healthy kids, people, could we please be healthy ourselves? I mean, who buys the food in our family? The children don't buy the Cheetos and the Cocoa Puffs and I'm just saying, parents are in control of what their kids initially learn on their palate. I never bought my youngest daughter baby food. Frankly, it was easier for me to mash it up and feed her off my plate. So therefore she has a taste for Brussels sprouts and broccoli. And I get it. It's not as easy as I make it sound. I do have experience with 6 children in various stages of growing. But I really feel passionately that if a parent's goal is to raise healthy children, that they model your behavior. If you're down on the ground with a foam roller, trying your best to do a plank, I bet in 2.5 seconds, your toddler is going to be down there with you, because mine was. So I'm not really trying to build hate with your parents, but we can't keep pointing to society to make healthy children. We have to say, what can I do to model for my children those behaviors I want to see in them?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think, I think the onus is on parents. And I think it's so hard because, everyone gets stressed and overworked. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's easier to quiet down your toddler in the store by feeding them goldfish. And, there's a lot of
Tasty,
reasons.
There's
Right. I
a
mean,
lot of grace
yeah,
involved in
right. Yeah, right. I mean, I think we can both put the onus on parents and give parents grace. I think those two things can exist simultaneously.
And I don't think being healthy has to be expensive. I'm not saying buying your kid a full set of hockey equipment. I'm saying take them to the park and run around with them. Or Frisbee is $3 at the dime store, whatever, right?
You just won our hearts by saying Frisbee. Juliet and I are huge Frisbee fans.
I didn't know that.
We think we were like, oh, pickleball, that's cute. Have you played Frisbee? Juliet also played Ultimate in college. So one of the ways we have a few assessments for athleticism for adults. One of them is double Dutch.
Oh,
We can find out really quickly if you're a good athlete or not. Looking at you, Lisa, double Dutch champion.
Lisa's very upset right now.
And we do a resisted run. That's more formal, but being able to throw and catch a Frisbee tells me a lot about the sort of state of play.
speed
Well,
agility.
and also even just we were just talking about this yesterday. Even just throwing and catching a ball, and also, by the way, girls should learn how to do this too. For all parents listening, but we've got a friend who's a middle school PE teacher, and they're really realizing they have to go back and teach some of these fundamental movement skills that kids in the old days
Vestibular skills.
used to learn just by way of free play, like throwing a ball. They have kids that are 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that have never thrown a ball and don't know how to throw a ball. So I think, it's great that they're focused on that and realizing it's an issue and trying to establish those skills then. But, there's also, again, like you said, you can go to Big Five and get a $5 ball and throw a ball with your own kid.
No, I was just going to say, picking up on what you just said and then taking it through the life cycle of how what we do when we're young affects when we're older. What I'm teaching everyone who comes to, I have the privilege of practicing in a Taj Mahal performance center. So I have the people who come here to work with me or to my retreats. I'm having our speed coach who works with Olympic track and field athletes. So she says she'll work with my mere mortals. We're teaching them speed and agility with the little hexagon jumps. We're teaching them to jump over little hurdles, because when we get old and have weak bones, we're one fall away from devastation. So we're retraining. And if we never learn to balance when we're a kid, we don't even know what they're trying to teach us now, let alone reteach how to pick up our feet faster and move in a different direction so we don't fall down.
I was just having a conversation with this incredible coach, Natalie Benson, who's the women's head coach. She's a 2-time Olympian women's head coach at Fresno State. And she started doing track and field warm-ups with her athletes. Not the track and field, just the A skips, just the, some of the warm-up pieces. And she's like, it's amazing what just some of the things that we figured out through sport, how we can rip out some of these essential aspects. and just have that be the exposure for these athletes who play water polo, who need to load, who should have some additional coordination with their foot on the ground. It is pretty amazing. As you say, that's so insightful and very, very progressive. I love it.
Is it? Oh,
If you
good.
just warmed up like a track and field athlete, you're probably going to be a really good dancer when you're really old.
True fact. True fact. Okay, so let's try to sort of switch back to this larger topic and more current one that I know. Well, I know you're excited about all these things, but aging and longevity. And I know you've done a lot of research on mobility and musculoskeletal aging. And what surprised you? What have you learned? What do you think is the most interesting takeaway for people who are in
And I
that
have a
age
follow-on
group?
question to that. It's a great question.
We're in that age group.
Well, from our original set of research, the reason I started studying master's age athletes was because there was a big study by the NIH called the Health ABC, which was a cohort study looking at a group of 70-year-olds and followed them for about 10 years. And from that, they did a bunch of interventions, but made a bunch of conclusions that they said, this is how aging is. We've observed it. Well, what do we, I rejected that. Basically, you go from vitality to frailty down a slippery slope to decrepitude.
Yeah.
And I rejected that.
I call that the long, slow rot theory of aging, right? Like you're just sort of like, well, it's over for you.
Right.
You're just downhill.
Well,
yeah, I agree with you.
Yes, I believe we can be healthy, vital, active, joyful, and I want to die quickly. Just go to sleep, done. Maybe playing my favorite game. So, but I wanted to prove that study was not the end all be all, because listen, it was a population study. What do we know about the population? 60 to 70% of the population does no movement any time of day. They are sedentary. So we can't say that studies like that predict the future of aging. What we can only say is that's what happens when you're sedentary. So our group of studies, I think there were 6 or 7 in total, were out to prove that when you take the variable of sedentary living out of the equation, you keep your bones, you keep your muscle, you keep your brain, you perform at a very high level into your mid-70s, and that you can be healthy, vital, active, joyful. That's what we proved with that series of studies, because at the time when we did them, it was an anomaly. Jack LaLanne and Banana Boat George Blair and the few oddities of people being active. But now the zeitgeist has changed and people are really interested, at least it seems like it, of how to maintain this vitality long into the foreseeable future. And so I wasn't surprised but what we found, but I was pleased that we were right, that we were not destined to become frail. But still, here's what's happening. 1 in 3 women, because they're so frail and a variety of other things, will end up in a nursing home because of their frailty.
1 in 3.
1 in 3. 1 in 2 women will have an osteoporotic fracture before she dies. If anyone, I brought this as a prop, I bring it everywhere. This is my femur. If anyone breaks their femoral neck, 70% of femoral neck fractures are women. If anyone breaks this, 50% of the time, men or women, they do not return to pre-fall function, and 30% of people die. So listen, I see the future of frailty today. I'm an orthopedic surgeon who still has to take call. I'm the one that's taking care of Aunt Minnie in her bed. So if I can look at what I know, which is if we take sedentary living out of the equation early enough, we may be able to prevent this devastation, because I do not believe that we just have to say, oh, it's part of aging. But lots of people cop to that. It's a cop-out when your doctor says that to you. If your doctor says to you, oh, your knees hurt, it's just part of getting old, nothing we can do, I'm going to invite you to find a new doctor or fly to Orlando where I am. Because that's a cop-out, people. Our bodies, no matter what age, no matter what skill level we start with, are God, I'm missing the word. Balance masters. They want to be in homeostasis. If you stress it out, it's going to respond by getting stronger, right? It doesn't matter your age. Some of the first aging studies were done in 90-year-old men sitting on chairs, and by reinvigorating their muscles and the neuromuscular pathways, their function increased 150%. There is never an age or skill level when your body will not respond to you.
So,
Can you, I say this all the time. Can you just repeat that last thing? There's never an
Or
age when
skill
you're,
level. When your body will not respond to the stress you put on it.
love it.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, we recently had Dr. Mary Claire Haver on the podcast. As a 51-year-old woman, I have, of course, taken a particular interest in the aging female athlete. And one of the things I notice is that women are taking more of an interest in strength training in particular. And we have so many amazing voices, yours, Mary Claire Haver, Stacey Sims, to just name a few out there who are really sort of like ringing the bell on that and the importance of that. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, of course. And what I still see, though, and I'm wondering if you think that it's a hopeless generation, is that in my generation, Gen X, and maybe even some a little younger than me, are so deeply have such deeply ingrained within them the idea that they need to eat and exercise to be thin, that I think even objectively, intellectually, they're kind of like, okay, I know I need to strength train, but they can't quite get over that deep rooted eat and exercise to be thin mentality, that it actually is making it so that they can't do it, or they can't actually lift a weight that will make a difference. And there still is this real undercurrent of like, I don't want to get bulky mentality. Are you seeing this? And what can those of us, you, me, other people who are trying to sort of wave this flag of like, you've got to strength train, it's critical. It's okay if you aren't a beanpole of a human. That still means you're healthy. I mean, I don't know what, other than just showing people what we're doing, like, how do you think we solve this? Or do we just need to wait for the millennials who seem to be more open to the idea?
Well,
It's too late for you. We're moving
Right,
on.
we're gone. Well, I think it will be a slow turn. I'm seeing it. People who know me or hear me know what I'm going to say when they encounter me. But I think all the things you said are true. I think what we have to do is keep giving people examples of healthy, vibrant women like you and me who, I mean, I think when women say, I don't want to get big, they think they're going to end up like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, okay, that took a lot of work, right? We're not going to end up that way. But what we are going to do is recompose our bodies from being soft and high body fat index, skinny fat, to being more muscly. And I think we just have to keep giving people examples that I'm a very normal, mere mortal athlete who happens to lift heavy and have the luxury of having muscles be my Spanx, right? Because muscles pull it all in.
You just had
Oh
me.
my
That
God, wait.
if you haven't
That's amazing.
Lisa,
Muscle-
trademark that stat.
TM. Oh my God.
Circle
Wait a
C.
minute, I put a
Muscles are my Spanx. That is
Oh my God.
genius.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that we
I
used to say,
can't like that enough. I have a permagrin on my face.
Juliet and I just happened to own a gym for 17 years where we saw elite level athletes, but also we tried to create an Olympic training center environment for mere mortals. And we did have a lot of people come in who were worried about the changes in their body composition as they began to train. And what we would say, eventually, I just was like, when you start feeling too muscular, let me know and we'll change your training. And never did people
No one
were
ever
like,
took you up on
my
that?
hamstrings and butt are just too jacked. No one says that. It never happened in 17 years. But I always gave people permission. When you feel like you're getting too big, to just let me know and we'll just adjust your program. People are like, perfect, I'm in.
That's so good that you just disarmed them from the fear of.
Oh, no, I hear you. I don't want you to get too big and jacked. I mean, how dare you? I mean, you know, I'm still working on it as 51. Can I actually get jacked? Someday I'll get jacked, but not today.
Well,
So
and you know, the truth of the matter is, in my menopause, we don't have to talk about all about it. I certainly can, but in the process, before I mastered this thing, which I truly have, I gained the 30 pounds, right? So I was at that critical juncture because I was always an athlete with 19% body fat, and I got up to, I don't know, 32 or something like that. I had a decision to make. Is this as strong as I'm ever going to be? Do I have to go and buy a whole new set of clothes in the next size up? Or do I just decide to put in the work that I'm going to recompose my body back to something I'm more familiar with? And so that's what I did, doing the things that you've heard about, lifting heavy and base training and sprinting. And it's not that my weight changed, but I didn't go back to my 19% body fat weight. But what changed is my body composition, and I'm back in the size clothes I've always worn because everything just tightened back up. And so it's not that we're trying to make you different. We're trying to make you the same that you were, just stronger, right? Does that make any sense? I don't want people to
Yeah.
be afraid of the
100%.
future. We're just trying to get
Yeah.
you back to a body you recognize.
Yeah. So I've been having this side text exchange with Dr. Stacy Sims, who's a friend of mine, and we've been trying to figure out how to better define what heavy means, heavy training for women in particular. But I think this is also for men who are new to weightlifting. And I'd love to get your opinion. You know, she just had a great
My
episode.
Peloton comes with little dumbbells.
Yeah,
Is
she
that
was
training?
just on the Huberman Lab podcast, and you know, she was talking about the idea of 2 reps in reserve, which I think is a meaningful one for athletes, but maybe for your everyday mover,
What does
maybe
heavy
a
mean?
little too complicated. And so I think, you know, how would you define heavy, especially so that people who are just starting to lift weights know that, you know, and obviously it's different. I get it. It's different for everyone depending on when they're started and their strength and so forth. But, you know, what does heavy lifting mean to you?
Well, I get this question all the time when I just say heavy lifting. They want to know, is 15 pounds heavy? I'm like, it depends what muscles.
Yes.
What muscle are we talking about here? Not for my quads. So you know what? I am a Stacy Sims devotee. So lifting, I know I've read all the books. So the way I explain it to people, and I try just to make it simple. I have found over the years, people need to be told what to do exactly, not a range, not a creative. So I say the weight you can lift for the 4 power lifts, because I do the basis of what I do is the 4 power lifts: push, pull with the upper body, push, pull with the legs, whether it's under a bar with free weights. But for those big lifts, I ask you to do 4 reps, 4 sets. And so you may have to play around with what you can do with 4 reps. And so I don't ask people to do 80% of 1 rep maximum, because I think that's hard for people who don't even know how their body works or
Right.
what the form is.
Right.
And so
What even is that?
yeah, what is that? So sometimes it takes a little experimentation, but this is when I really encourage people to hire a knowledgeable strength and conditioning coach. I'm like, you don't have to work with them forever, but don't go buy the new bag. Can you just work with this coach so at least you don't get hurt on the 4 base power moves? Because then they'll give you an idea. Now, I do like Stacy's explanation of 2 reps in reserve. The other day I was deadlifting. I'm like, okay, let's try this. And I put on whatever weight I was using, and I was just judging. Could I do this one more time? Yeah, because I had done 4. Could I do this one more time? Yeah, I could do 5. Do I think I can pound out 6? Well, I'm always afraid I'm going to blow out my back. I never have. But so at 6, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this again. So for me, that kind of worked, actually. And it's not too complicated for me to understand. So that's what I've been explaining to people. Frankly, it's not new information, but I'm confirming that it works on mere mortals.
Yeah,
Well,
and-
let me just say, this is the first time I've ever heard an orthopedic surgeon say, hey, you're going to do 4 sets of heavy 4. That's gnarly.
Is that? Am I the
Dude.
most avant-garde surgeon you've ever had to deal with?
That is-
Seriously, Dr. Vonda.
That is so legit. And frankly, I think people are really shocked that it's, again, low speed. We can handle, we can make mistakes. But I love that if we just go slow under those heavy conditions and just give yourself a chance to adapt, you'll be surprised. And it is safe.
Well, even interestingly, we haven't gotten to talk about bone. Maybe next time I'm back talking about bone, but even for people who have known osteopenia, which is low bone density, studies have shown, the Lift More study was a very controlled trial where people with osteopenia worked with a strength conditioning coach under slow lifts, and they could still lift heavy, right? And so
That's right.
having bones that are troublesome is not an excuse not to load them.
I've mentioned this before. There's a great program in Australia run by the state, and they're tapping into other strength and conditioning centers. but people are going in and doing basic linear progressions, which means they start small and add a few pounds every single time or add a kilo every single time. So they small incremental gains, 5 sets of 5 on some of the basic movements, deadlift, strict press, bench, right, back squat, and it's reversing osteoporosis.
And they're doing it in a
How
clinical
crazy.
setting because there's a lot of people who can't relate to it. But I just also want to emphasize what you said about how much we can't recommend enough that people make the investment in a coach, a strength and conditioning coach, to learn these big, important compound movements. I mean, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be pressing and deadlifting and squatting and swinging a kettlebell. And so, there's obviously 50,000 weightlifting moves you can learn. But if every person who's new to weightlifting just learned the real basic movements and learned how to do them on a basic linear progression, I just can't emphasize what a good investment that is. And then it's not, you don't have to work with a personal trainer forever. There's now 1,000 relatively affordable, cheap programs you can get, but you do need to know the movements first and learn them from a coach. And then you really can kind of go off on your own and work, do it in your garage or on your own without a coach. But I think that initial investment is so important.
And I just want to say, and I'd love your feedback on this. We're seeing, yes, kids are going out the door and specializing. And for us, our perspective is now that it's really important that kids have some strength and conditioning programming to support their sports, because that may be the second sport. That may be the only place where they get movement variety. That may be the place where they actually load out of this little tiny pattern. And they carry those skills the rest of their lives. So just doing a sport means that you're going to learn how to eat and sleep and manage your pain and warm up and cool down and strength train and be a member of a team. So I want to expand the definition of sport. And the reason, if you're listening to this, is to get your kids involved early, is that if they're going to play on, they're going to have to speak this language. We see so many kids don't have any strength and conditioning in high school. They go to college, and now they're in college playing college level sports and at college level strength and conditioning, and they're not prepared. But also, to your point, if you just didn't get this as fundamental childhood education, it's a lot harder to pick up. Not impossible, you're going to have to learn another language.
Yeah.
So something really exciting has happened in very recent days related to the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. And I don't know if anyone's heard that phrase before, and I only know that phrase because I follow you. And so tell us a little bit about that. There's something exciting that's happened. What's going on?
Yeah, so just a little background. You had Mary Claire on, and so your audience knows about the changes that happen when estrogen starts to decline when you're 40-ish, and then around 52 when no more estrogen is being made in our ovaries. And so people associate that with the common things, hot flashes, night sweats, brain fog. But the fact of the matter is, from the top of your head to the bottom of your toe, there are estrogen receptors. And so something very common that women show up with as it relates to this time of life is a shoulder that doesn't move. All of a sudden, you did nothing. You lifted nothing. You did not fall. It doesn't move. It's stiff, and you can't hook your bra strap. And so frozen shoulder is everywhere. Something else that women have is out of nowhere. This is one of the primary things I had when I was 47. I'm an athlete. I hurt so bad. My whole body hurt. I almost couldn't get out of bed every day. So, not surprisingly, if there are estrogen receptors everywhere, there are estrogen receptors on every musculoskeletal tissue. So my little group and I here wrote a paper called The Musculoskeletal Syndrome of Menopause, which takes the 6 most common manifestations of losing our estrogen. That includes frozen shoulder, which is due to inflammation, raising inflammation, which also total body aches, which is arthralgia, loss of skeletal muscle, loss of bone density, rapid increases in arthritis because estrogen supports the cartilage matrix, and the loss of satellite muscle stem cells. Estrogen can have a profound effect on those issues. And so we made up this category so that a person doesn't have to go into their doctor and say, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is going to result in that doctor's face going blank and their hand's going to go on the doorknob, because how in the world in 15 minutes that we're allowed to talk to you can we cover 7 things? But if you come in with a nomenclature that has become common amongst women and common amongst clinicians of all sorts, it's just a common language. So this paper that was published about 3 weeks ago has become the #1 paper downloaded by this journal. I know it's a little bit of a flex right now.
No, it's so
Dude,
great.
keep flexing.
Right.
Keep flexing.
As of last Monday, 142,000 downloads, with the average downloads of a best in class paper in JAMA, New England Journal, British Medical Journal, is read 10,000 times. I know 50% of all good research is never read at all by anybody but their authors. So it just means that I think authors of great work need to be out broadcasting it, because that's the only way it's going to help people.
You know, I've said this before, but it's interesting that in Chinese
Japanese.
and Japanese too, frozen shoulder is called 50-year-old
Yes,
shoulder.
it
Isn't
is.
that interesting? It's almost like people are like, this is weird. It happens always this time.
Huh. Well,
So first of all, where can people find that so that our audience can continue to join the throngs of people downloading and reading this paper? So where can people find that? And obviously we'll link to it in the show notes. That's question 1.
Yep. So it is open access. So if you Google musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause, it will come up, or you Google that plus my name, Vonda Wright, it will come up #1. So just
It's great.
print it.
Yeah, go read this thing, people. And so, as you mentioned, we had Dr. Mary Claire on, and we talked extensively with her about menopause hormone therapy and replacing estrogen in our bodies. So maybe we could leave that one on the table. But for people listening to this who aren't taking that, won't be taking that, but are either approaching or in that phase of their life, I have a feeling I know what the recipe and suggestions are, but just to, further emphasize it, what are your recommendations for women in, before, during, and after this phase of life to at least try to minimize the chances of suffering from these syndromes?
Well, and what I'm about
This
to tell
syndrome.
you is a lifestyle. It's not a diet. It's not an exercise program. It's not something we're going to do for 6 weeks. And if you've never done any of it, I suggest you start one at a time, so it's not overwhelming. So my little suggestion is #1, as you're hearing me saying it, if you have 1 hour in your day and no other time to do anything, you're going to lift heavy weights. You're going to lift, because that is going to help you build muscle, bone. By building muscle and bone, it helps your brain. It's just overwhelming benefits. So #1, we're going to lift heavy. #2, we're going to stop doing the crazy high intensity aerobic every single day. That used to get me hurt all the time. And we're going to adopt base training and intermittent sprinting. Those 3 things, the weights, the base training, the sprinting, is what recomposed my body, and it recomposes the bodies of the women I care for. If you feed yourself correctly with at least 1 gram of protein per ideal pound a day, and we cut out the scourge of simple sugar, white pasta, simple carbs. I'm not saying cut out carbs, because athletes and active people need carbs. And if you're training for a race, you're in the middle of a race, you're going to need simple sugar. That's not who I'm talking to. I'm talking to people who are active but not elite. We need most of our carbs in the form of slower carbs that don't spike your glucose. If you're training, listen to you guys. You'll tell you how to take glucose for training. And then finally, I've discovered, after not sleeping for about 9 total years, that sleep and recovery is critical for me. I can't do much of any of those things unless I protected my sleep. So I go to bed every day at 9:30. I get up every day at 5, even on the weekends, because that consistency is what sets my circadian rhythm so that I can recover enough to do those other things. The thing that I've added this year, because it's a lifestyle, not a diet, but I did want to add one more thing, is I'm really critically thinking about my VO2 max maintenance right now. And then I'll leave you with this is, for your listeners know what VO2 max is, but what I'm really interested is the VO2 max independence line. So there comes a time when your VO2 max drops so low, which is 18 per men and 16 per women, that you can't be independent anymore. You can't really walk you can't do anything but sit in a chair. You can't live independently. So I'm really interested in maintaining my VO2 max. And so I've added on the crazy 4 minutes as fast as you can go times 4 sets with only 4 minutes of recovery times 4, just to try to maintain my VO2 max so I don't ever reach the independence critical line.
Yeah, I've never heard that. And, obviously Atia and so many other longevity experts have talked extensively about how like that is the metric, right? That is VO2 max is the metric. And do you recommend, and again, this is only for the few and not the many, do you recommend people or your patients get VO2 max testing, or if they can, and then if not, is there sort of like a surrogate for that, like a bargain basement surrogate for that?
There's I recommend if you have access to a metabolic lab, go get it. Go get it when you're 40. So you know where you're starting and then you can invest in maintaining it. If not, get one. I'm going to just warn people, it's not that pleasant. So I'm not saying do it all the time. I personally have had it done twice. I don't love it, but it's important data. But there are surrogates, like there's one called the beep test, which you can set up on a football field with 60 feet, and it's how fast you can cover the ground, and there's a calculation. Or you can tell a lot. I'm looking around my office now. You can tell a lot about how you're doing from grip strength. The two things that I use in a calculation of how we're doing from a longevity standpoint is VO2 max and grip strength. So it's a surrogate for your total body strength.
I love it. Get out there and test your VO2 max, people, if you can afford to.
The problem with you is that you're so skilled in so many domains that you can speak orthopedics and you can speak childhood development. And then we're at the other end of working with masters athletes and I guess senior masters athletes now. Is that what we are at 50?
Yeah, you're senior athletes. And then
are we geriatric? Are we already geriatric masters athletes?
When you get up to 80, they call you grandmasters. 50 is masters. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
I do have a lot of friends who like Laird Hamilton, who's 60, and it helps me to project into the future. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be fine. My hair will grow back. I'll be jacked. It's gonna be 60.
You'll be permanently tan.
Permanently tan. It's gonna be fine. I have a model. My point is, there's so many entryways into the work that you're doing in your beautiful brain. Where would you send people? Because I really do think you're just this incredible fountain of wellness and experience and exposure. Where would you want people to come find you?
Well, every single day I'm on Instagram at Dr. Vonda Wright. And I post about a lot of things. I'm going to start posting a lot more about what I'm learning and writing my upcoming book, which is called Unbreakable, which is really the science of aging, which I've always studied, meets midlife. And what do we do next, right? From my perspective. So it's called Unbreakable. So on Instagram at Dr. Vonda Wright, I've written several books, which are very old now. So what they teach is functional lifting, because that's what we used to teach people in 2004. But I don't suggest that anymore. So anyway.
What I would like to say too is that as a longtime follower of you, and to anyone listening, one of the things I love about your content is that you're a real person. You have a busy, crazy job and you're fitting in these practices on the edge of that, which is really nice to see. You're not a fitness influencer that has 24 hours a day to exercise and journal and sauna and do all these things. It's clear that you're living a busy, full life.
Yes.
And amid that full life, you've figured out how to incorporate these practices in your own life. And that's really refreshing to see. And one of the reasons I love following you. So thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me. I loved it so much.
Oh, I can't wait to hang out and
and we'll obviously have you back. Steak. We'll have you back when Unbreakable hits the airwaves as well.
You.
So stay tuned for that, people. Anyway, thank you again, Dr. Vonda, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Ready State Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, check out all our episodes here or at thereadystate.com. And be sure to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes to help others find our show.
Check us out and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Ready State.
Until next time, cheers, everyone.
You got it. You better stop it.